Welcome to the Power Grid, where tonight we'll attempt to be amateur meteorologists. And what is it with all these 10-game slates? But before we get to the plays and a lot of weather talk, let's start with Vegas. John, I'm sure you're going to kick us off with the weather talk because it is impacting our lines and especially our totals. So get us going, John.
Yeah, it's an interesting week. Very low scoring week this week. There's only, 3 games of interest in terms of higher ends, the top of which is Seattle going over to Kansas City. That game has about a 49.5 point total, with Kansas City being a big 10-point home favorite. So they've got almost a 30-point implied team total. And then the drop-off is pretty significant to Minnesota and Dallas, who are both resting around 26 points. And after that, it becomes pretty pedestrian. You got a bunch of teams in the 20 to 23 point range. And then this week, I think, is the biggest week of the year in terms of good defenses. You could play a lot of defenses this week. You're looking at probably 8 to 10 teams. Can you still hear me, Devin?
I can hear you.
Okay. Ryan's face went immeasurably cold, so I thought maybe I was thought my something happened.
No, we're just bored from you talking about weather, and we're only 2 minutes into the show.
Not true.
Weather is the
story of the week.
The thing of the week this week. There are 2 games, and this let's talk about weather collectively. Cleveland and Chicago. Cleveland's hosting the Saints and Chicago's hosting Buffalo. Both of those are going to be extremely cold with high winds. And, I think it's important to talk about how weather affects how we approach DFS. And I know that we touched on it upon starting this podcast, and I think we disagree a little bit. I think where we agree is wind definitely affects the passing game. And I think we're all in the same boat there. So those games in Cleveland and Chicago, avoiding the passing game, including Josh Allen and his inflated salary, are advisable. I guess the question then is, we've got 6 other games to my liking that are outdoors, that are 20 degrees or below. And I'm going to throw it over to you. Is there any concern about how you approach the players from those games, or doesn't it matter? And maybe it doesn't matter this week because of how many games are that cold.
Yeah, I mean, so when I think about weather, I think about 2 things. One, it's a really good time if you're an NFL fan to go to a game because tickets are incredibly cheap. You can get into the Browns, Ravens, or Browns
Saints, which is actually even worse than Browns Ravens. Devin, might not have a lot to do with the weather.
Hold on. Let me finish. You can get into the Browns, Titans, or Ravens games for less than $5. So if you want to go to a game, you can. I'm just having some fun here. The only time I care about weather is when a southern team or a dome team goes and plays in weather that they're not used to. And we saw this in Miami where it was like 55 degrees when they were playing, forget who it was, Seattle. And like all of their team had coats on the sidelines. Like it significantly favors the home team for me because they're in it all week. They're prepared for it, where the road team may not be. I can't, like, every time I think about weather, I think about the Tennessee Patriots game where the Patriots won like 56-0. So like, can points be scored? Yeah. Do people tend to overreact to weather? Yes. May it have a little bit of impact, ever so slight? Yeah, it could, but I don't think it has as drastic of an impact as what people think.
Yeah, I agree. I think, wind is the tough part, right? But you have, even if it's snowing, you a little bit, right? You're not going to get a full blizzard in a 3-hour window necessarily, right? If there's a 6 inches of snow called for in a 24-hour period, is it all going to fall in the 3.5 hours of the football game? Probably not. And even if a little bit does, the offense knows where they're going, which, maybe makes the defense a little more likely to slip and fall. I mean, who knows, right?
But there's the only spot that there might be precipitation or snow is in Cleveland. Yeah. Everywhere else, the snow will have passed by then. So, you look at it and it's sunny and clear, which being from Chicago, 20 and sunny and clear, as long as it's not windy is like shorts weather in February.
Yeah. I mean, it's really not that bad. I would agree. And the other thing in Cleveland that's even more worrisome than the snow is that wind. So I just like every week, there's going to be a ton of overreaction to the weather because, there's some bad weather. And also in season-long leagues, it's, semifinals week, right? So people are just naturally, a little on edge about their teams and how alive they are and things of that nature. So, we'll have a little bit more weather talk, I think, throughout some of the analysis. Maybe John more than Devin based on the flavor of our first 6 minutes here. But let's move on, guys, and talk through some positions, what we're doing on the main slate. Where, again, I referenced it at the top. 3rd week in a row, we only have 10 games. So, 20 teams to choose from, even though there's no buys. We have 20 teams to choose from rather than, our typical complement. So that plays a role in what we're doing. And then, obviously, if you want to cross out some weather situations, that does too. So, John, why don't you get us started at the quarterback position and tell us where your head's at there?
Yeah, I mean, this is a week where I think you can spend down at quarterback, given what we talked about with the weather. The one thing I was going to say in terms of how you might think about approaching the weather, there has been some research done. If anything is affected by cold weather, and cold in the context of what we're describing here is 20 degrees or lower, is the average yards per attempt for quarterbacks typically goes down 10 to 15%. And so from my perspective, I think what that tells me is that on a week like this week, where 7 of the games that we're talking about are 20 degrees or less, I probably want to go heavy on running back. Particularly in tournaments as well as in that flex position on both FanDuel and DraftKings. So I'll be going heavy on running game this week. And in line with that, I think I'm spending down at quarterback. The 2 quarterbacks that are on my list are both playing in indoor games. The first is Kirk Cousins, if you want to go a bit higher at 6,300 against the Giants. Kirk Cousins has looked great. And it's pretty easy to look great when you've got 3 top-tier receivers in the form of Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and TJ Hawkinson to throw the ball to. That said, you can save $1,500, and I think the chalk this week probably is going to be Gardner Minshew going against my Dallas Cowboys. In Dallas, Minshew, I'll be very honest here, I like to root for him, and it's going to be tough this weekend. I think they're going to be competitive against the Cowboys. And Minshew, the news came out late about Jalen Hurts being injured, and I think he is officially out as of earlier today.
Correct.
So Minshew, 4,800 is almost a free square. It's going to be really difficult for him not to hit the 3x value you need for his salary. And I like what it does when I get to the running back position and in terms of what I can do there. So I'm more than likely going to end up with Gardner Minshew in cash.
Yeah, and so John obviously mentioned it for me there. The biggest news of the week, Jalen Hurts with that shoulder injury will not play. We may be saying the same for the next week or two. Also, which, in a little less impactful, Ryan Tannehill with his ankle is out. Malik Willis will start for Tennessee. Lamar Jackson with his knee is once again out. Tyler Huntley will start for Baltimore. The Gardner Minshew thing, I think people might have been scared off of him because of the Dallas matchup, but then those same people might have seen what Jacksonville did to Dallas last week and say, also, he's 4,800. So
And
what do we need
Dallas,
to do?
I mean, as a guy who watches Dallas every week, Dallas plays to their competition. If the opposing offense scores 30 points, they let up 28 points. If the opposing offense scores 13, they're letting up 12. It's uncanny. I hate it, but it is what it is. So
other than that 40-3 game they played against the other weirdest team in the NFL, and the Vikings. Devin, who do you like at quarterback? Anyone different? You disagree with John at all?
No, I think in cash, you really have two options. I don't know that I agree with the Kirk Cousins play. I like Dalvin Cook in that game, but I'm going to go on the opposite side of that game and Daniel Jones. I'm targeting everything against this Minnesota defense. I do think that Gardner Minshew is the clear-cut cash game lock. I think you're going to see him in 60-70% at least, maybe higher, which kind of sucks, to be honest, because it means that everyone's build is going to be very, very similar. So I think Minshew's the play, and Jones is going to be popular. Can he take advantage of he's going to be popular in GPPs. Can he take advantage of the matchup? That's where I'm going back and forth, because Daniel Jones has his own inefficiencies from a passing perspective. That, like, is he someone who can put up 300 yards against this putrid Minnesota defense? I don't know, but I think he's at least interesting to look at. And then another guy, I mean, this week is weird because you look at the worst pass defenses in the league, right? So there's Minnesota, Tennessee, and Detroit. The opposing quarterbacks this week are Houston, Carolina, and the Giants. Like, could one of these three, and maybe it's Jones, but like, could Davis Mills pull up a decent enough game? I don't know, but like, these three are by far the worst pass defenses in football statistically, and they're facing arguably the three worst quarterbacks in football.
Yeah,
so it's an interesting dilemma this week.
The Lions gave up 300 to Zach Wilson in rainy weather last week.
Right.
Like,
so could Sam Darnold?
Yeah, that's a thing. I mean, and we talked about weather. It's going to be 21 degrees in Carolina, but it's not going to be windy really as much as you might see in Cleveland or some of the other games. So, how bad could that be? It's really interesting. I think if I had to rank those guys, it would be Daniel Jones, then Sam Darnold, and well below that would be Malik Willis, who just looked wildly incapable of throwing footballs here so far this year. Devin, you went like this, like you had a thought.
No, well, Malik Willis isn't facing one of the three worst defenses. I was saying Tennessee is.
Oh, you said Houston. My bad. You're right. So
Houston,
Davis Mills.
So Davis Mills sucks. And
all right,
they don't have a lot.
I'll put Davis Mills slightly below Sam Darnold, but not as far below as I would have put Malik Willis. My bad.
Yeah. So I mean, look, right now I have Sam Darnold in the comments section. I'm sure is just typing the nastiest things ever imaginable. And please put those in the comments. Devin sucks. I get it. Sam Darnold's going to be 2% rostered. And,
John
going up against Detroit.
His notes. Or were you showing us the red part of your Vegas value chart, John? I couldn't tell.
No, I was sticking up for Devin for once. Go ahead,
Devin. Sam Darnold, not a great quarterback, but going up against Detroit, could this game be a shootout? I think it could be a little bit of a back and forth. And Sam Darnold threw for 300 yards in 3 games last year. So he's done it before recently. And at 5,100, he could be a decent pivot off of Minshew.
Not much more for me. I mean, I think he's a great value. You've already talked, Devin, about what the build's going to be in cash. And typically what we see is that GPPs reflect cash largely, right? I mean, you're going to get a lot of people stacking up Gardner Minshew with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And hey, why not? Those guys have been fire the last 2 to 3 weeks. And Minshew is one of the better backup quarterbacks in the NFL. So why not? I think the pivot this week is to look at other cheaply priced quarterbacks in situations where they have some upside. And I think you've nailed it. I love Sam Darnold this week against Detroit. It's an awful defense. He's got a very talented receiver in the form of DJ Moore. DJ Moore, by the way, if you're into the air yards world, he's one of these guys that looks to be popping from a regression perspective. So I think he's an excellent play for both cash as well as GPP this week. And then you've got some ancillary receivers there, all of whom to look to be good value. You just got to pick the right one. Whether or not it's Terrace Marshall or somebody else. But I love the call, Devin. I'm with you. And in that game, the 20 degrees in Carolina, low wind is what I'm reading. So if you're, this is a week that 7 out of the 10 games, I think, are going to be outside and or cold. And if that's the case, I don't know that you need to avoid those games because you can't afford to. There are going to be people who go off, and I like the call. Other quarterbacks on my list for GPPs, I like Mac Jones going up against Cincinnati. We know the Bengals can put up points. Here we go, guys. It's a 10-game slate, and I think there are only 3 games, maybe 4 games above 40 points. You got to go with some bad teams this week.
Bill Belichick said today, I think we might start Mac Jones for the rest of the regular season. We're trying to win this game, but I think we might. Or something.
Mac Jones had a great matchup last week against the Raiders and was 13 of 31 for 112 yards.
It's a tough scene.
No, it's a hard pass.
I get the context, John. It's a tough scene.
Jacoby Myers and bless him for his week.
Start him at quarterback. He can throw the ball 30 yards just to the
wrong direction to the wrong team.
He was a quarterback in high school too, so that's the amazing part.
Jacoby Myers, Nelson Aguilar both come out pretty hot on the model this week, and that's why Mac Jones pops up. And then the other person for GPPs that comes up for me is somebody Devin's already mentioned. That's Daniel Jones. I don't like Daniel Jones for cash, by the way, and I agree. Think he's too inconsistent there. But for GPPs, he's got some cheap receivers who are popping in the model this week. Darius Slayton, Richie James, Isiah Hodgins, excuse me. But I guess the question is, can you go with Patrick Mahomes this week? I'm curious to hear I have an opinion here. I'm just curious what you guys think. Highest implied team total on the board against Seattle. We know Geno Smith can put up points, but that is literally the coldest game of the week, with the exception of Chicago. I mean, they're right there.
I'd rather just take Geno Smith. I have Geno Smith as a decent GPP play just because they're going to have to keep pace. I just worry that Kansas City may just run against this awful Seattle run defense. It's turned into the second half. They've been one of the worst in the NFL. So does Patrick Mahomes throw for 350 and 4? It's always in the spectrum of possible. But man, there's 2 running backs that I want to play this week that are going to be almost impossible to fill in with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. You know what, Devin, we would have said the same thing last week at Houston, and he still went 336 and 2 and 5 for 33 and 1. Granted, he needed overtime to do it, but that matchup was a sieve of a run defense and a pretty good pass defense, as you've highlighted on the show in past weeks. So sometimes Patrick Mahomes is just Patrick Mahomes. John,
if Derrick Henry wasn't facing Houston, I would agree with you.
Yeah,
but
fair.
He's the guy I'm clicking first, and there's not a lot of salary to pay up for quarterback. So
sure.
This is a week where, look, Patrick Mahomes throwing for 300 yards. I'm looking at his numbers. It looks like since week 6, all but 1 week. This is a week I don't think he gets to 300. I think they run the ball super cold. I would bet the under on this game this week. I think 49.5 is high. Could come back to bite me, but I'm going to be fading this game. I think that DK Metcalf is good in cash. We'll get to that, but he's going to be over rostered in GPPs based on what I'm seeing. And we'll get to running backs as well, because Kansas City, there could be a rising of the guard there, but I'm fading that game, I think.
Okay. So we've got, you know what? I'm going to recap at the end because it becomes a lot more streamlined that way. So Devin mentioned it earlier, halfway doing my job after last week, being, definitive about this being his show. So he's doing it again. Please hit us in the comments, especially if you are going to, disparage Devin while doing so. We really love those. So let's move on to running backs here. Guys, it looks like the Seattle guys are going to play, and Damian Harris maybe might play for New England. I don't know that, that matters too much, especially with John being really all over that passing game in New England. So Devin, it's Derrick Henry. You already mentioned it. What else are you doing at running back, or just, make a claim to tell everybody else why it's Derrick Henry?
No, I mean, look, we don't need to spend a lot of time on Derrick Henry. Malik Willis just only helps Derrick Henry. He had 32 carries for like 220 yards in their first meeting against Houston with Malik Willis.
Yeah.
Tennessee threw the ball 10 times last week. If they can win the ball throwing 10 times this week, that's the route they're going to go. Yeah. With that said, I don't know if there's a path, but Christian McCaffrey is just as good of a play, if not better, than Derrick Henry. And in cash, if you go 4,800 Gardner Minshew, you might be able to build a lineup that has both of these guys in it. You'll have to take some flyers on some other players, but it's certainly possible. And with no Deebo Samuel, Brock Purdy has shown that he's willing to throw the ball and check the ball down to
and
McCaffrey.
I think that's by design there too. So
it's like, hey, what do we have left? Elijah Mitchell's gone. They got rid of, who was it? Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. One of those, Raheem Mostert was in the offseason, but they got rid of Jeff Wilson. And then, George Kittle has been up and down this year. So all they have left is McCaffrey. They paid a ridiculous price for him. So let's just ride this guy and see how far we can get is basically their strategy.
Yeah, and Washington kind of resurrected Saquon Barkley's season last Sunday night as well as a matchup. So good thoughts there. John, who else do you like? Maybe give us some middle to low guys, because I'm sure you agree with those two picks. or if you have to pick one, who is it?
For me, if I'm picking one, it's Christian McCaffrey.
Okay.
He just does everything on DraftKings. I think you can make a case for Henry on FanDuel.
His price is $9,800 though, which is, props to FanDuel. I've given them a lot of hard times over the years for bad pricing. $9,800 for Derrick Henry on a week where he's facing Houston is the right price.
Yeah, I mean, because we haven't mentioned yet. I'm actually surprised that Devin didn't bring it up, but the last 4 games that Derrick Henry has played against Houston, 219. These are yardage. 219, 2 rushing touchdowns. 250, 2 rushing touchdowns. 212, 2 rushing touchdowns, and before that, 211 with 3 rush touchdowns. Those are the last 4 games. This guy has their number.
So why do you like McCaffrey over him?
I mean, on DK, I'm gonna go a little bit. You can call me John Hester on this call, on this take, but I do like him because of the point per reception. He's $200 more, and then in terms of actual output, I've got McCaffrey projected at 26.3 and Henry at 23.2. They're both my plays, by the way. In cash games, I built a lineup earlier today with Gardner Minshew, a quarterback that has both of those running backs, and I don't hate the rest of it. So I
think that's the way to go, to be honest. I think there's going to be a lot of people who do that, and there's going to be some people who try to get cute and say, hey, can I survive with one of these two? I think they're the clear-cut crop of the running back position this week. Like the 7Ks, there's not a lot there besides Dalvin Cook, but he's been extremely up and down and extremely volatile this year.
Yeah, and after that, it's I know, Ryan, this is where you led me, but I didn't bite. Like, who do you go? Where do you go after that? Guys, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen this week with Jerick McKinnon? I mean, this guy has done everything right over the past month, and he's getting more and more time. I'm pulling up as I speak about it. So week 12, 34% of snaps, 13, 47, 57, 62. And in the meantime, Pacheco is doing the opposite.
Yeah.
Is McKinnon the RB1 there now? And if so, can we trust him at, what is he, 5,900?
5,900. And Pacheco's 5,700 for context. So I think last week, John, that the snap count boost was a product of Pacheco had a second quarter fumble or maybe first quarter and was removed from the game for a little bit. I think they would like to see that at close to a 50-50 thing. And then you're at the, McCaffrey Henry argument, albeit, very, very much lighter than that. Do you like McKinnon better because he catches passes? He's not going to score 2 touchdowns every week like he has the last 2, but he's getting over 100 yards a game. Certainly he had 112 receiving alone in week 14, but he had 112 total last week. So I think you're going to see 15 to 20 touches and 55% of the snaps, which for 5,900 on a high-powered offense, not bad. He shows up really high in our projections.
Here's my issue. I think in a cash game setting, he's fine because he's cheap enough and he catches passes, and you don't need that much from him to get to value.
Yeah.
In a GPP setting, like if you look at the last two games have been close in Kansas City. And in a close game, that's going to favor him because they're going to keep throwing the entire game. But I think that there's risk here where if the Chiefs get out to a 7-0, 14-0 lead, they're just going to run the ball against this defense. And you may not need Jerick McKinnon to have these third downs and the offense struggles in catching. He's caught 15 passes over the last 2 weeks. Is that sustainable? Or is he a guy where, hey, just 3 weeks ago, he only caught 2 passes? I think his floor is pretty low, but you sort of know that going in. So I think he's a fine play in GPPs or in cash. I'm sorry. I just don't know that he has the upside to do it again. Maybe it's because we have a long history with Jerick McKinnon and can he really put 3 games in a row together? I don't know.
Let me ask a question then, because what I'm looking for here is the RB3 for cash.
Yeah.
When I used our single lineup builder earlier and I hit fill the rest of the lineup, when I got to flex and defense, it gave me Jerick McKinnon and Dallas Cowboys, which we'll talk about defenses. In that same arena, 5,500 to 6,000, there are a couple options, one of whom in my model stands out very similarly to Jerick McKinnon. That's DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift's going up against Carolina. They are 2.5-point favorites, and they have basically the 4th highest implied team total. If you look at his recent game logs, he's caught 3, 4, 4, 3, 5 passes. Obviously, Jamal Williams has been the guy that scored all year long. Who do you choose? If you come down to it, is it McKinnon or DeAndre Swift for cash?
McKinnon.
It's McKinnon for you, Ryan?
Yes, absolutely.
It's McKinnon for me.
Okay.
I mean, so
I think the decision is between Pacheco and McKinnon.
Yeah.
And with Pacheco, you're getting, or Pacheco, or however you pronounce it, you're going to get like 13 to 15 carries. You're going to get like 1 to 3 receptions. You pretty much know that. So 7, his prop right now is 68.5 rushing yards is decent for his price. If he can add 2 to 3 receptions, That's 10 points right there. And then red zone, I'd have to take a look, but I don't know. I might be on the Pacheco side versus the McKinnon side in cash this week.
John, I'm going to give you a hot take that will surprise you because of the receiving game comment earlier. And I'm hold on. Am I mentioning the right game? Are they on the slate? They are on the slate. Just real quick, wanted to make sure. I would rather play J.K. Dobbins at 5,800 home against Atlanta than DeAndre Swift at Carolina.
Look, that was the next thing I was going to say, Ryan, is there are a half a dozen running backs who are within 0.1 in terms of value in that price range. DeAndre Swift, puke on Dante Foreman after he did what he did to me last week. Isiah Pacheco, J.K. Dobbins, Jerick McKinnon, Miles Sanders a little bit up there, Devin Singletary. They're all really, really tightly. And this, to be quite honest, is probably where cash games were won and lost this week, is where you pick that last guy.
Yeah.
Because I think you're going to get the same quarterback, the same two running backs, more than likely the same tight end. And it's going to be what you do at wide receiver and that flex position that wins or loses your cash games.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll just say: avoid cash this week. Take a week off. Like, if you don't feel strongly about one of those guys, just maybe play a 3-person or 5-person, because there's 5 or 6 guys there, and picking the right one, you might as well go after a better return than a single double up of your entry. You might as well go in a 3-person or a 5-person and try to double or get more than that 2x dollar amount. So
yeah, I agree.
Yep. Okay. Well, good talk there on running backs, guys. I mean, I think it's clear, we're looking high price, low price, right? And we're going to flex a running back this week. Go ahead, Devin.
Yeah, there's still some GPP guys that I like that I want to
Sure,
call
please,
out.
go ahead.
So John's going to throw up because of the weather, but Alvin Kamara is one of my favorite GPP guys of the week. Alvin Kamara has scored a touchdown in one game this season. However, he has 27 targets plus carries on the year, which tells you that there's positive regression coming, because that's not sustainable to have a running back being targeted that frequently in the red zone. And the perception is that Taysom Hill comes in and he vultures everything when they get inside the 10, which simply isn't true. So the Browns are without their top 5 linebackers this season. Jadeveon Clowney was just ruled out. Sion Takitaki, Jacob Phillips. I'm forgetting a couple other guys, but who cares? Top 5 linebackers. If you're in a cold weather scenario, what's the easiest path to completing passes? Check downs to the running back. Get him out in space. This could be a game. No Chris Olave. I know the over-under sucks, but this could be a game where Alvin Kamara gets 18 to 22 touches and catches 7 or 8 passes, and we start looking at, hey, he's putting up numbers similar to Christian McCaffrey just because it's high winds, and the Browns simply can't stop any running backs.
Yeah, I got to say, I don't hate it. John, what are your thoughts on that? Devin made a compelling case to me.
I mean, to be fair, he did make a compelling case, but I do hate it.
Both can be true, huh?
He did make a compelling case. I will give you that, Devin. But this game is awful. I mean, he's basically got to do everything. The Saints, they have a 15 point implied team total. So they're going to score 2 touchdowns, and he's got to get both of them.
But in a GPP setting, what if the game goes to 42? What if they score 45? We're assuming that it's going to score 32, but is there a scenario where 40 plus points are scored? I think that it's not. Like, using your logic, is there like a 10% chance that happens, because he's going to be like 4%? He's going to be like 4% rostered.
But if you go to the Saints snap count page on our Football Guys site, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 9 running backs listed this season. They've been a revolving door. It's Alvin Kamara and David Johnson. Yes, the David Johnson from the Cardinals and Texans. That's their running backs right now. And he was back to his normal workload last week. He was only 62% snaps, but he had 21 carries and a couple catches. So it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, I guess. I mean, I remember seeing last week David Johnson was in there in the red zone.
Like, why are they? Though. Bad fumble.
He did fumble in the red zone, but why was he in there? Like, what's going on with Alvin Kamara? I mean, last week he had 23 touches. Before that, it was like 14, 13, 11, 12, 16. It could happen. It's a GPP call. And so for that reason, I can't poo-poo it because God knows the dude has talent. I just don't have a lot of confidence that game goes back and forth. It's going to be a slog. I think, it's not a game I want to target.
Fair enough. And I'm not aggressively going to target that one either. All right, let's move on to wide receivers.
John, anyone else you need to mention?
Sorry.
I know we still have a little bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've already talked about DeAndre Swift. I like him as a GPP play. And then I believe Ryan brought up J.K. Dobbins. I think Dobbins is a decent play this week against Atlanta. They're basically a touchdown home favorite. I don't like playing J.K. Dobbins when Lamar Jackson's under center because of what he does inside the red zone. But with Tyler Huntley taking snaps, I understand he's not like a traditional pocket passer, but they're not as likely to let him kind of run the ball and do whatever he wants with it at any given time. So I think Dobbins is interesting at 5,800. I've got him at looks like, I don't know. Just pulling this up, make sure I got it right. About 7% likely to hit GPP value. And he's right around there. I think 8% ownership. I don't know where you might have him, Devin.
5.5 right now.
Yeah. So I think he's as of Thursday night, a decent GPP play. And we should all point out that this is the latest we will ever record this show in the sense that the main slate's on Saturday this week rather than Sunday. So the material is a day more mature than it typically is entering the weekend.
Just the material, though, not the personalities.
That's very fair.
So I've now officially cut you both off in an attempt to move the wide receivers. Are we good?
Yep.
Okay. My apologies. All right. We can you can comment in the YouTube section about how bad of a host I am if you'd like. But if not, subscribe and hit the bell and like the video for us. That certainly helps. We will finally move on to wide receivers now. Bigger news here. The biggest news, I should say, is Tyler Lockett is out for Seattle. And Devin mentioned in the prior section, Chris Olave will be out for the New Orleans Saints. Guys, the running back section took so long. I forgot who started it. I think it was Devin, though. So, John, why don't you get us started at wide receivers?
Okay.
It took long, rightfully so. I'm just kidding. But go ahead.
I think we're still good on time, so I don't know if it took too long. Cash game, wide receivers with Tyler Lockett out and a game script that's going to require a lot of passing on behalf of Geno Smith. You can't not consider DK Metcalf, 7,100. I think he's kind of the guy that if you're, quote, spending up, and you're likely not spending up to like Justin Jefferson. You can, by the way. Justin Jefferson's a great play, but I want to go for CMC and Derrick Henry, not Justin Jefferson. So dropping down a bit from him, DK Metcalf is at the top of the list. There's two guys in the mid 5Ks that I like. Juju Smith in the opposite end of that game. Schuster's looked decent over the past few weeks. I think he's a decent cash game play. Probably my favorite play on the board at the position is DJ Moore. DJ Moore is 5,500 against Detroit. He's the guy in Carolina. Best player on the offense, period. And they go up against probably one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And then I think you're going to have to take a chance at wide receiver in the sub 4K range if you need to go, or if you want to go for those two high-end running backs that we talked about. And I think there's a couple different ways you can go there. I'm quickly going to rattle them off, and maybe I'll tell you my favorites, and then Devin, you can chime in with yours. But just looking at the model, Nelson Aguilar at 3,300. Rashid Shaheed, who I mentioned last week on this show. Devin said he didn't know him. He scored a touchdown. Terrace Marshall Jr., I would not recommend it if you go with DJ Moore. That's too much Carolina exposure. And then Noah Brown is a guy that, even though I'm not seeing on my computer screen, I've got him written down. Noah Brown against the Philadelphia Eagles is 3,600. He's my guy, by the way. I think Michael Gallup has looked awful in the past 6 weeks. And it looks like Noah Brown is kind of taking that wide receiver 2 role there. He was the guy that did the tip and pick shout out to tip and pick to lead the Jacksonville Jaguars to beat my Cowboys in overtime last week. But I do like Noah Brown. I think for a PPR league, he's the type of guy that's going to get you 4 catches for 50 yards in a game that I do think could go back and forth against Philadelphia and Gardner Minshew. So, Devin, who do you like on the low end before you say anything else?
Marquise Goodwin at 4,300 and Richie James at 3,900.
Would you do Goodwin and DK Metcalf, or you don't like my DK Metcalf call?
No, I like the DK Metcalf call. If you can get up there, 7,100 is, if you're comfortable doing that, I think Metcalf is a great play. I think Goodwin is going to fill in, like the rest of their roster for Seattle is Laquan Treadwell, who backs up DK Metcalf, so he's not really going to have that big of a role. Derrick Young, who's never had a catch, and Penny Hart, who I believe is a converted running back. So they have nothing besides these 2 guys. So I think either one of them are fine. Look, if you said, hey, I can't really get to Metcalf, you could look at Goodwin. Could you play both? Maybe. I don't know that I would recommend it, but if you went with like a Geno Smith, Marquise Goodwin, DK Metcalf in like a GPP, I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world.
With Juju coming back.
Yeah, I mean, this is the game that if you're going to target it, I know John said bet the under, but if there's a game that could score 60 points,
it's true.
This or the Cowboys game would be the 2 that you would look at. And the targets in this game are going to be extremely narrow.
Yeah.
On the Seahawks side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree. It almost sounds like you could, DK Metcalf and Terrace Marshall, or DJ Moore and Marquise Goodwin, right? You're 1 on one of those teams and you're 2 on the other, since we like both receivers, or at least since John likes both receivers. John,
it's uncanny. I'm going to cut you off a little bit, Ryan, because I've got Henry, CMC, Metcalf, and Moore in the cash game lineup that I built, all because Gardner Minshew at the top of the show. I go back to what Devin was saying. Maybe it's not a week to play cash because of the way everybody's going to build.
So you have both wide receiver 1s then. So ignore the 1-2 thing I just said. That's interesting.
Yeah, because logic would tell you can't do that, but I'm telling you, based on the numbers, I'm looking at the lineup I built, you can do it.
And then you presumably have kind of a really cheap 3rd wide receiver.
And that's the Noah Brown that I mentioned.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Who was my guy well before he was your guy, by the way.
That's fair.
The Ohio State University.
Man, what a wide receiving core that has been for a long time.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Devin.
One name that hadn't been mentioned, and maybe John mentioned it in his listing of 1,000 names there. Jacoby Myers at 4,800. I know he was the scapegoat of last week, and people are just going to look at him and not want to play him. But like I said, I'm targeting guys either, for me in this wide receiver game, I'm targeting guys either in the elite matchups. So Houston, Carolina, or what was the third game? The Giants. Narrow target shares, such as Seattle, or games that could shoot out, such as Dallas, Philly, or Seattle, Kansas City. That's basically it at the wide receiver. I can't get behind Rashid Shaheed because of I like Alvin Kamara, and I can't possibly have a liking of two players in that game. But Jacoby Myers, I don't think the Patriots are going to be able to run the ball against the Bengals this week. So with DJ Reader back, they've had one of the best run defenses in football. So I think they're going to have to throw the ball. John said he liked Mac Jones. I almost threw up in my chair, but I think Myers is a fine play. Going back to Chris Moore, 4,700. Look, I know he disappointed last week, but the other guys on that roster are Philip Dorsett and who else? Like this is a really, really bad team who they have no running back. Royce Freeman's going to be their starting running back. Looks like even Chris Moore is questionable, but if he does play, and all signs are likely that he will, is Amari Rodgers or
Jordan
Akins? Like, nah.
We'll get there, but he's how I'm getting everybody else into the lineup.
I figured. Jordan Akins was my guy before he was ever any of your guys.
Oh, here we go.
All right. Anybody else we're leaving out at receiver? We have done kind of a high end, middle end, low end so far, which I hope the people enjoy. Are we forgetting anybody? I'm trying to pull up the projections. I'm kind of surprised based on what our lineup optimizer says that Jahan Dotson wasn't mentioned. 3,900 for Washington at San Fran. He's 554 and a touchdown in week 13 and 4,105 and a touchdown in week 15, which are the last two games for Washington with their very odd late season bye. Any thoughts on him, guys? Devin, you mentioned Richie James, exact same price. So you have a preference there? Is it James?
Just a tough matchup going up against San Francisco for Dotson. I mean, but that's where I'm saying, like, is cash viable this week? And it's extremely difficult because you're going to win or lose between Jahan Dotson, Nelson Aguilar, Richie James, Marquise Goodwin, because everyone is going to spend up at McCaffrey, Henry, and then spend down at Minshew. So, and a lot of people are going to take DK Metcalf. So it's really, really important to understand that. And if you're comfortable doing that, that's fine. But if you're even slightly different than that, you should get more than a 2 extra term.
Yeah, and that's where you talked about getting into a triple up or a 5-person or a 10-person.
10-person, 20-person, 5-person. Yeah. You don't need to go in the crazy 100,000 GPPs. You can go in a 100-person tournament, and if you're saying, hey, I think Christian McCaffrey is going to struggle this week, he's going to be 40 or 50% rostered in those 100-person single entry lineups. Yep. Good point. So, don't come to us just for player selection, but game selection too. So, I like the tips. John, have we forgotten anything at the wide receiver position? GPPs, we haven't gotten there, have we?
No, we haven't. There are 2 players I want to call out. I've already talked about some of my GPP quarterbacks, and so hopefully folks are putting 2 and 2 together and understanding. If I say Sam Darnold, the guys I'm looking at there, Mac Jones, as well as Daniel Jones, I like the receivers on those teams. So I won't specifically call those guys out, but kind of one-off selections. Adam Thielen against the Giants, he's 5,300. That's an indoor game. Everybody's going to try to gravitate towards Justin Jefferson. TJ Hawkinson is $400 cheaper than Adam Thielen. But Thielen's still playing basically 90% of the snaps. I think he's got a touchdown in 2 or 3 of the past 4 games. And he's a guy that can get you there. I think he's a strong GPP play this week, but my favorite GPP play this week, a la Devin, and that is Devin mentioned Alvin Kamara and made a case for him in a game where the team is slated to score 15 points. I'm going to outdo you, Devin. My team is slated to score 14.5 points. That's the Atlanta Falcons. I like Drake London this week. He's 4,800. He has been the focal point of that offense over the past 2 to 3 weeks. His weighted opportunity is off the charts. His air yards are off the charts. He is bound for positive regression. And I think he's an excellent kind of if you're thinking about Jacoby Myers at 4,900, go with Drake London at 4,800 and get all the leverage. Go ahead.
First time in the history of the show. Hold on. Just for everybody on audio only. First time in the history of the show that Devin hasn't just interrupted a take he doesn't agree with. He was actually like signaling timeout and then did the hands on the shoulders for like a 20. So Devin, is this a full TO or a 20-second TO? What do we have?
It's a 20-second TO. You can't look at the last 4 weeks of stats when Desmond Ridder is now the starting quarterback in Atlanta.
He was the starting quarterback last week, was he not?
Last week.
And he threw the ball for 97 yards. 7 for 70 went to Drake London.
Yeah,
I get that.
And 70% of those yards went to Drake London. He
had 11 targets, and the entire team had 26. So if they throw 36 times,
fine. But saying there's positive regression coming because of 3 or 4 weeks when Ridder was that's all.
Well, I also was surprised that you recommended Jacoby Myers, given that you've called him I think like a projection machine or a projector's favorite here over the last couple of years.
I don't love him.
You said Zay Jones was this year's Jacoby Myers of last year, and you so if you're leveraging off Jacoby Myers, then can Drake London really be that bad?
Keep going, Ryan. No. Keep going, buddy.
All right, I just want to make sure.
Just pile on in the comment section below about how wrong I am about Zay Jones. I was right for like 7 weeks, and then it just all went to hell.
My wife will tell you I have a bad memory, but when Devin talks, I tend to remember it. All right, first time ever with the TO signal. That was fantastic. Devin, any GPP wide receivers that John didn't mention?
No, we've gone too long anyway.
All right, fair enough. At this point in the show, I want to remind everybody, please check out footballguys.com/DFS. We've referenced here our single lineup builder, which is an excellent tool, 4 sets of projections in there. You can pick 3-4 players as your core and then have it kind of fill out your lineup based on optimal. And you can cross out players you don't like, for instance, Jacoby Myers or even Zay Jones if you like, or Drake London. You can cross them out so they don't show up. Also, plenty of good articles on the site, including many written by the other 2 gentlemen here with me tonight. So tight end guys, let's move on there. John mentioned Jordan Akins because we have to punt to fit the studs in this week. So Devin, let's start with you. Which way are you going if it's not Jordan Akins? And I'm guessing it's not.
Yeah, it's I think there's a couple guys. I tend to think that in bad weather or cold weather, we talked about air yards, and that's going to help, or the lack of air yards, and that's going to help tight ends. So with that said, there's a couple guys that I like this week. In a cash game setting, I like Noah Fant this week, and I like Dawson Knox this week at 4,100. Probably going to play Fant just because the target share in Seattle is so limited, and I think you could very easily play both Metcalf and Fant or Goodwin and Fant, and you're spending about $10,000 or $7,000, and he had 5 for 32 last week, caught a touchdown. There's a lot of short opportunities open for Tyler Lockett being out, and they're going to have to go to these different guys. For a GPP play this week, David Njoku, 4,300, very similar. If the Browns aren't able to throw, Donovan Peoples-Jones is not going to be able to catch the ball at all because he's a deep threat type guy. So how else are they going to throw the ball? And that's going to be to David Njoku. Apparently he was practicing shirtless today and said he's going to warm up shirtless. Not that that means anything, but something to keep an eye on in facing the cold. So it's a bit of a narrative that, like, I think that this Browns game is completely overblown, that it's only going to be 32 points. If this game shoots out a little bit, you could very easily have Kamara and Njoku and perform just fine.
Yep.
I don't think Jordan Akins is a bad play by any means. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not dying on the Jordan Akins hill.
John?
Yeah, I mean, the two guys I have listed for cash, I've already talked about Jordan Akins. Devin made the case for how bad the Houston wide receiving, or just say receiving core, is earlier in the show. And Akins, quite frankly, might be the best of the bunch. And he's 2,900, and he allows me to get to the places I want to be elsewhere. So he's the guy I'm likely to go with. If you have salary, I think TJ Hawkinson is a fine play at 4,900 if you can get there. But he's you probably can't get there unless you're taking
Hawkinson or Kittle.
If you ask me who's more talented, I think it's George Kittle. If you ask me who's more likely to hit 3x value, it's Hawkinson, just because of the way those offenses are using them. Obviously, Kittle's coming off a big week, and I hope that continues. But they just haven't been using him in the way I'd love to see Kittle go to another team.
But with no, I mean, I guess the case for in a GPP with Kittle is no Debo this week again. So last week was his first week that he had a big game in a long time, and Debo wasn't active. And could he be a pivot off of McCaffrey? If he scores 2 touchdowns, it's 2 touchdowns that McCaffrey's not scoring.
Yeah,
I'm with you on that sentiment. And that game is one of the 3, I think, that's decent weather or not bad weather. So from a GPP perspective, yes. Cash game, no. I'm still going to stick with Hawkins or Akins. For GPPs, the 2 guys on my list, we don't know yet if Hayden Hurst is going to play. But if he does, I like him because I think he'll be, from a recency bias perspective, not played much. He's 3,200. And then when we talk about lineup construction and those 2 running backs that are 8,000 plus, there's zero chance that any lineup that has those guys in it is going to be able to cram Travis Kelce into it at 8,000. So a good way of building a contrarian lineup is to throw Travis Kelce into at the top. And then all of a sudden you can't get both of those big guys in. And you just heard Devin give you the case for why air yards matter on cold weekends. We know that Patrick Mahomes can make a living out of throwing 7-yard slant passes to Travis Kelce and making it look easy. So I like that play a lot in terms of tournaments.
Yeah, that's a great point. Many ways to get leverage. We've talked about price leverage with going Drake London off of a Chalky or Jacoby Myers, but lineup construction leverage is another great one, of course. And then also, in-game leverage, right? Team to team with McCaffrey to Kittle. So I think, just in the last 20 minutes of the show, we've hit on 3 different ways to do that. Devin, any GPP tight ends we forgot? Nope. All right, gentlemen, defenses. It's cold, so the defenses have to be active. They have to be, limiting yards, and all kinds of crazy things with the football are going to be happening. John, who are your favorite defenses this week?
Build the lineup you like. Slot a $3,000 defense into your lineup to start. Put the Falcons in to start. Build your lineup, and then if you need more cash, drop down. And if you need less cash, move up. There are a slew of good defenses between 2,000 up to 2,900 in terms of value. I mean, the Bears are on my list for what it's worth. The Bears are the, quote, worst defense of the week against the Buffalo Bills, but because of the weather and the conditions with 20 mile an hour sustained winds, the Bears are absolutely in play this week at the stone cold minimum 2,000. If you're looking elsewhere, I think the Saints are good at 2,800 against Devin's Browns, but the Patriots, the Cowboys, the Texans, the Eagles, they're all in play and they're all sub 3,000. Just build your lineup and put your defense in last.
Dallas Cowboys are the clear-cut top defense on this slate, and I don't think it's particularly close. They lead the league in sacks, have the best pass rush in the NFL. Gardner Minshew is going to be throwing the entire game. The worry I have with a team like the Saints is Cleveland may run the ball 35 times, and I've talked a lot about it as far as, points are great, but once you get over like that 13-point threshold, points don't really matter anymore. So unless you're scoring below 13 points, 13 or less, you're getting 2 or 3 points. Really, a lot of your defensive points are on sacks, fumbles, interceptions, touchdowns. And I think Gardner Minshew is almost a lock to get sacked 3 or 4 times and probably throws at least 1 interception.
Yeah, and they're only 2,600, so I think that price
they're priced as if Jalen Hurts is playing, and that's
100%.
That's what how many weeks has Dallas been the most expensive defense every single week? I actually think the Eagles are interesting too at 2,200.
Yes,
that's way too cheap for how good that defense is.
Yeah,
this is a week where I typically recommend that you spend up to be contrarian at defense. This is a week where you don't need to do it. Just slot in the defense that you can afford.
I think the ownership's going to be a little flatter than usual, even at a relatively typically flat position like defense.
I would say completely avoid the top end. So like the Bills, there's no reason to play because would it surprise anyone if Justin Fields threw the ball 7 times this week?
No. That's how they started the year.
Right. It just what's the point? If they can have success running the ball, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. All right, guys, a quick little recap before we go on to final thoughts. So cash games, John says Kirk Cousins and Gardner Minshew. Devin says Minshew first. I think John, you probably have Minshew first, given what we went through the rest of the positions, which is why I like to recap these at the end now. And also Daniel Jones was mentioned by Devin. GPPs both like Sam Darnold versus Detroit, and John liked Mac Jones and Daniel Jones as GPP calls. The former, which was not unanimous here on the show, that being Mac Jones. Running backs, we're jamming in McCaffrey and Derrick Henry. It seems like that was pretty unanimous throughout. John preferred Jerick McKinnon over Isiah Pacheco as a Chiefs running back in the mid-price range. John also said DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins for GPPs. Devin made a very compelling case for Alvin Kamara as a GPP play. Wide receivers, John says DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, and Juju Smith-Schuster. And then a slew of low-price guys, including Terrace Marshall, Nelson Aguilar, but Noah Brown being the favorite. And then Devin, Marquise Goodwin, I thought was a really nice call and a compelling case on the narrow target tree. Richie James on the low end. And then Carolina receivers, New England receivers, Drake London, also mentioned by John for GPPs, of course. Jordan Akins, shout out to UCF at tight end, and TJ Hawkinson for John. Devin likes Noah Fant in cash, and then Njoku and Kittle in GPPs. And then the spend up to be contrarian at tight end, Travis Kelce from John at GPP play. Sorry. Guys, final thoughts as I'm out of breath here recapping. John first.
No major final thoughts from me outside of saying that, look, it's going to be a low-scoring weekend. I don't think you need 250 to win the Millionaire Maker this week. When you look at your lineups, you're probably not going to be happy with what you've got. It's just because the Vegas totals are lower and the prices of the players are not reflecting the weather or the Vegas totals, however you want to look at it. So don't worry, the prizes still play the same. So go at it, and happy holidays.
Well said. Devin, anything from you other than don't play cash this week?
No, I think I've talked enough about strategy this week. Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah. Enjoy the weekend, everyone. Thanks for following us, and I hope that you guys have as much fun listening to this show as we do making it, and so we certainly appreciate all the goodwill, and again, enjoy your holiday season. With hopefully everybody finds some folks to be with and some football to watch. So with that, we'll close. On behalf of Devin Knotts and John Lee, I'm Ryan Hester, saying thanks for being with us tonight, and thanks for being a football guy.